We have enough harnessable wind that entrepreneurs are dying to get into. And just Montana, North Dakota, and Texas alone to provide the entire electric needs for America, even if every American owns an electric car. We have enough solar, according to a recent Scientific American study, exhaustive study, in just the most barren desert lands of New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada to provide 100% of the electrical needs of our country, even if every American owned an electric car. The impediments, there's three impediments. One is the $1 trillion, $1.3 trillion a year in subsidies we're giving to the oil industry. And that doesn't even include the $4.5 trillion that we're going to spend on the Iraq war. If we were paying the true price of oil at the pump, we'd be paying $12 a gallon, and they couldn't compete with renewables. But we are paying the price, but we're paying it through taxes and through all these other hidden costs. The other impediment is the Republicans over the past 27 years, Republican rule has allowed the infrastructure of this country to fall apart. So we don't have a national grid that is capable of transporting that energy. And that's the only reason we can't completely fuel our country with wind and solar and geothermal. If you're a wind farm owner here in New Mexico and you want to sell your electrons to New York, you ought to be able to, but you can't because the grid is so outmoded and overextended and antiquated that it simply can't carry the electrons. They would disperse, they would diffuse before they cross the New Mexico border. We're spending today, the grid is also misaligned. It doesn't reach the big sun area, solar areas of the Southwest. It doesn't reach the wind areas, the Midwest. We need to realign the grid. We need to make it smart so that it can store energy and deploy it. It can store wind energy during the doldrums, solar energy at night, and deploy those things. And so that every American can become an energy entrepreneur. And every home can become a power plant. If you've got a solar array on your roof and your house is generating more energy during one part of the day than it's using, you want to be able to sell that back to the grid and get market rates for it. If you have a plug-in hybrid, which we're all going to have by next year, right? If you have a plug-in hybrid, you ought to be able to sell the energy that's in that battery to the grid when it hits peak demand. You can store that energy at night for 2 cents a kilowatt, then sell it back to the utility for 40 cents a kilowatt when they hit peak the next day. And still, for 15 minutes, you make a lot of money, and then you can fill your car up again. They do this in Alberta. They're doing it in parts of California. We ought to be able to do that everywhere in this country. And if we could do that, we could eliminate basically about 70% of the natural gas that we have in this country, that we use in this country. It's almost all used in peaker plants that are inefficient, we don't need. And you could use that gas instead to power our automobile fleet, all indigenous gas. And we could get rid of the rest of the coal and the oil and the other dependents. We can do this. All we have to do is build the grid. We built an ARPANET grid for the internet highway back in 1979. In 1980, there were only 500 PCs in this country, and IBM said it was a dead-end technology. But because we built that national backbone, the marketplace took care of itself, and now everybody has a PC. And what happened to the price of information? It went from very high and it plummeted. The cost of bits and bytes went to rock bottom. That's what will happen to electrons if we build a national electric grid. The price of electrons will drop to almost nothing. And one of my companies that I'm involved in, BrightSource, just contracted with the state of California to build a solar thermal plant, the biggest one in history, a $9.5 billion deal to build a gigawatt of power a year to California. We're building that plant cheaper than you could build any new plant. It's the same as a small new plant, a gigawatt. It's small, and it's cheaper and faster than you could build any new plant. And you can build a coal plant, an oil plant, or a gas plant. So we can build the infrastructure and the plants cheaper. The electrons are hitting New Mexico for free every day. All we have to do is harvest them and put them into a grid. If we had the infrastructure, we could do that. We don't have to go to Saudi Arabia and dig it out of the ground and refine it and use battleships to get it across here and fight $4 billion wars to make sure it doesn't get interrupted. We don't have to. We don't have to cut down, the Appalachian Mountains. According to Scientific American, an area 92 miles by 92 miles of the desert Southwest would provide all the energy we need in North America, Canada, and the United States. You know, that's much smaller. I flew over Appalachia the other day and flew over just one cut that's 400 square miles. You know, they're cutting down the entire Cumberland. They're flattening it out. By the time they finish, there'll be an area the size of Delaware that is flat, and it's the richest temperate forest in the world, and we don't need to do that. And if you look at the nations that have decarbonized their society in every case, they have achieved extraordinary and immediate prosperity. Iceland in 1970 was the poorest country in Europe. It was 100% dependent on imported coal and oil. And the president of Iceland, who I met with last week for a long time, decided to decarbonize because he was scared of global warming. But guess what happened? As soon as they did that, Iceland today is 100% energy independent. It gets 90% of its electricity from geothermal. And it's today the fourth richest country by GDP on the face of the earth. Now, Iceland had economic problems this week, but it's because the government of Iceland stupidly bought bundled derivatives from con men on Wall Street, and it's caused their economy to crash. But their energy, you know, they're one of the world's great energy exporters. They can't run lines across the Atlantic, so they import bauxite from Jamaica, use the surplus to smelt it into aluminum, and then they sell the ingots on the international market. That's their way of exporting energy. 25 years ago, 15 years ago, companies wouldn't dream of relocating to Iceland. Today, corporations are lined up to get into Iceland to take advantage of its cheap, clean, abundant fuel and the high standard of living that goes with it. Sweden did the same thing in 1996. It began decarbonizing its society, and today Sweden is the sixth richest country by GDP in the world. Entrepreneurs rushed into the space to develop new forms of energy from wind, from solar, from tidal, from geothermal, from hydro, from putrid garbage, and from sawmill waste. And today it's the sixth richest country in the world. Brazil decarbonized its electric system, its transportation system, and it's now, as a result, enjoying the longest and most robust era of prosperity and economic expansion in that nation's history. This is the first generation of Brazilian kids that is guaranteed a high school education free because of the huge surplus they've got from decarbonizing their society. Costa Rica, which decarbonized its power grid, is now the richest country in Central America. So we have much greater geothermal resources in this country. They're utterly untapped, and they have in Iceland. We have much greater solar and wind resources, and we have, all we need is leadership. We need, and this is what President Obama has promised us. He said, in 10 years, I'm going to get out of foreign oil altogether, and we're going to do it by building a national grid. He understands this problem, that we just have to build this marketplace, and then every American is going to become an energy entrepreneur. I'll tell you one other story. It doesn't, people say, John McCain's saying, oh, you can't do it in 10 years, and the oil industry's saying you can't do it in 10 years. Well, you can do it in 10 years. We have one of my other companies called Better Place, has a contract now with with Israel, where we are going to get Israel off of gasoline within 3 years. We're partners with the Israeli government. We are right now rewiring the entire country so that there can be electric sockets under every parking meter. We have two joint venture partners, Renault and Nissan, automobile manufacturers, who are going to build electric cars for us. They're going to be so cheap, we're actually going to give them away to the Israeli people. They're good cars. They go 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds. And we're going to have, the batteries go 120 miles on a charge. But if you need a new battery, you can pull into any gas station. You pull into a structure that looks like a car wash. They lift you up on a lift. They slide out the battery, exhausted battery, and slide in a new one. We own the batteries. The battery's the most expensive part of the car. It's $20,000. We're going to build 4.5 million of them. And now Israel is going to have a reservoir to store renewable energy. So they're building huge wind farms and solar farms in the Negev desert. They're going to be able to store that energy in our automobile batteries and then deploy it all over the country.